All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Sacramento Storytellers Guild monthly meeting. We are having some storytellers from across the country, some local people here in person, a few on Zoom, and we're going to have poets as well as storytellers. So we encourage you to sit back and listen to these amazing storytellers and poets. And our first one is an old time professional. He's old, let me tell you, he's really old. His name is Mark Berry, and he's up in the Auburn area and is a producer of many events up in Auburn that are fantastic. He's told stories for many years, being so old and professional. So please welcome the fantastic storyteller, lots of humor, great guy, Mark Berry.
Hello, Ed. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mark. All of a sudden, I feel old for some reason. I can't imagine why. This story has a supernatural aspect to it, and you may have heard it before, and if so, I hope you enjoy hearing it again. This story is about a Chinaman named Po, and Po lived a couple of centuries ago in the land of China in a rural area, in an area that was just filled with poor rice farmers and surrounded by other areas, provinces that were full of poor rice farmers. And in this area was a very wealthy couple. Now, this couple, see, they were the children, this man and this woman were the children of an arranged marriage. And what happened was that the wealthiest family from this province had a daughter, and the wealthiest family of this province had a son. And back then, of course, all marriages were arranged. And so they thought the only way to do it was to have their daughter and their son, and they did. At the time the story takes place, the couple's parents have passed away, and they are extremely wealthy. They live in a house on a hill that's more like a palace, really. And around their beautiful area of gardens, flower gardens, food gardens, just there were these high walls. And since they had so much of everything, they could afford the very best gardeners to prepare their food and their beautiful flowers and to decorate their home. They just had everything. They had a beautiful life, the best food, the best clothes, the best everything that one could have in that time. And they also had, among their servants, they had the fellow that stars in this story, and his name is Po. And Po was, oh, he was with them for decades. He was so loyal, almost a member of the family. Well, it came around this time of year, right about in the autumn time of year, and the master of the house called his loyal friend and servant Po and said, Po, I have a task for you. I want you to take this pouch of gold pieces, and I want you to go as far as you need to go and take as long as you need to take. And I want you to find a master storyteller. And I want you to buy a story from that master storyteller and bring it back here to us so that we can have something to do other than just reading on these long winter nights that are about to come. And well, Po didn't know anything about storytellers and didn't know much about stories, in fact, but he was such a loyal man, loved his master and his wife so much that he said, of course. And he took the pouch of gold pieces and headed on down the hill to the main road. And when he got down to the main road, he thought, well, I guess I'll head over to the nearest village and start asking there. So he went down the road toward the village, and there was rice farmers here and there tending their little flooded rice paddy fields. And One such rice farmer was leaning against a tree near the road, and they said, "How do you do?" to one another. And Poe said, "Isn't it a lovely day?" And the rice farmer said, "Isn't it a lovely day for a journey? Where are you going?" And Poe said, well, he told him the assignment that he'd been given by his master. And the poor rice farmer, well, he didn't know anything about stories, and he didn't certainly know anything about storytellers. But he did know something of a pouch of gold pieces. And so the rice farmer said, "You are in luck, my good man. It just so happens that I myself am a master storyteller. I'm just watching this rice field for a friend of mine while he's away. As a matter of fact, I have just such a story that you need." And Poe was, you can imagine how excited he was. The first person he ran into was the person he thought he might have to look for far and wide. And so Poe sat down in a comfortable position to hear the story, because you remember he had to memorize the story, excuse me, so he could take it back to his master and his wife. So as Poe got ready to listen and remember, the rice farmer was trying to think of something to say. And just about then, this white crane, beautiful white crane, big wings, long stilt feet, this white crane came gliding down and landed on his stilt feet in the flooded rice paddy right there. And the rice farmer said to Poe, "Look, here he comes." And Poe memorizing, "Look, here he comes." And then still watching the crane walked toward them a little bit. And so the rice farmer said, "Here he approaches closer, step by step." And then the crane stopped and was looking around in the water, maybe looking for a minnow or something to eat. And so the rice farmer said, "Now he stops, he looks, he listens." So Poe's, remember, now he stops, he looks, he listens. And not long after that, the crane turned on his big stilt feet and took a few steps and spread those beautiful wings and took off. And so the rice farmer said, "Now he turns, he runs, he flies away, never to return." So Poe's remembering, now he turns, he runs, he flies away, never to return. And then there was a long silence, and finally Poe said, "Is that all there is?" And the rice farmer said, "What more could there be?" Well, Poe wasn't an educated man. He didn't expect to understand the story, but he was glad to have it. And so he gave the rice farmer the pouch with the gold pieces in it, and he walked the short distance back to the master's home that was more like a palace, really, on the hill, and repeating the lines of the story over and over as each step as he walked to remember it as best he could. And he showed up much earlier than the man and his wife thought he would, and they were excited that he had found a master storyteller so quickly and managed to purchase just the story they wanted to tell each other on these long, dark winter evenings. And so Poe sat down with the master and his wife, and he started telling them the story, and they started remembering it, getting ready to enjoy telling it to each other. Well, when they heard the story, they didn't much understand it either, but they weren't well-educated people, and they didn't expect to necessarily understand the story that well. They thought, well, maybe as we tell it and hear it over and over, maybe we'll come to understand it a little better. As this was happening down at the bottom of the hill at the village, there were some folks in there drinking rice wine, and there were these three fellows that, well, they didn't have the best reputation, let's put it that way. And they were drinking their rice wine, and one of the three said, "You know what? I think I'm one of these days I'm going to go up that hill to that beautiful home up there that's more like a palace, really, and I'm going to relieve themselves of some of their wealth. I just think that'd be the thing to do." And the other two said, "Oh, you would surely lose your life. Certainly they have money for guards, and certainly you would never get away with it." Well, they had a little more rice wine, and after a sufficient amount of rice wine, the first fellow said, you know, I'm going to do it tonight. I'm going to go up there. It's dark now. I'm going to go up there and see if I just can't redistribute some of their wealth into my pockets. And the other two said, bad idea. You know, we wish you luck, but it's been nice knowing you. And the rice farmer, you know, the tavern guy had a little more rice wine for courage, and he finally headed up the trail, up the path, up to the home that was more like a palace, really. And as he was walking up the path, what he didn't know is that it was the master's turn to tell the story to his wife that very evening. And the master had lit the candles and lit the paper lanterns, and he had arranged his wife's favorite chair just so. And he put on his favorite of all of his silk robes and his matching hat, and he laid out everything as best as he could to do the best job he could at telling the story to his wife on this evening. Well, as that was getting ready on the inside, the would-be burglar, thief, ne'er-do-well found a vine near that tall garden wall, and he managed to climb up the vine very quietly. He managed to slip down on the inside of the garden wall surrounding their beautiful property. And as he did, he heard this big voice that sounded like it was coming from everywhere. And the voice said, look, here he comes. As you can imagine, the burglar was mystified. What kind of enchantment could be going on here? I hear, I'm observed, but I don't see anything or anybody. Well, he had enough rice wine courage that wasn't going to stop him. And so he walked closer to the house. And as doing so, he heard the second line of the story. He heard that voice that seemed to come from everywhere, as it said, see, he approaches closer, step by step. Whoa, the burglar was, now he didn't know what to do. He was, oh my gosh, you know, what kind of sorcery is guarding this place? I was warned, but now I don't know what to do. And then he heard that voice. It sounded like it came from everywhere. And the voice said, now he stops, he looks, he listens. Well, that was enough for the burglar. He was out of there in a flash. He turned and he hightailed it out of there, but he didn't make it over the wall before he heard the final line of the story. Now he turns, he runs, he flies away, never to return. And do you know that from that day so long ago to this very day today, that house on the hill that was more like a palace, really, has never been disturbed by anyone with bad intentions, which just goes to prove to you and I the value of a good story well told.
All right, Mark, thank you for that fantastic story. And now I'm a little leery to go on because I did drink a bottle of rice wine before I came in. Thank you, Mark. Always fantastic.
Good luck with that.
And even though your face was freezing at different times with your internet connection, you are so expressive. It was really interesting just to watch, and we didn't see your mouth moving.
Oh, I'm so
we just heard your stories. It was really cool. Thank you. All right, so our next.
I'm so sorry, Ed. I talked to my server after last time you mentioned that, and they said they went from 15 gigabytes to 75 gigabytes. I'm so sorry I didn't take care of that.
Yeah, not too bad, but you know, just keep plugging
Thanks for
away.
letting me know.
Probably you have to move to a different location. Maybe China. All right, so our next storyteller is, some people call her ancient, but she really is just this bundle of wonderful energy. And she comes all the way from Oklahoma. And I visited her this summer and celebrated her 89th birthday with her. So 89 years young, full of great energy. I knew her up in the Seattle area. Her husband was my mentor. When I went through college, I built cyclone fences, and he was the boss working for out building the fences, and he taught me so many things, and I got to know her, and they had a nice long life together. He passed away a couple of years ago, and she moved back to Oklahoma, where she's an author. She's written really great books, and she just had this very cool writing project. When I was there, some magazine, she can probably tell us a little bit about it, sent people a first paragraph, and then you had to pair up with somebody else, and you each took turns writing the paragraph until you got to 51 paragraphs and ended it, and then submitted it to the organization. And Judith, that'd be interesting for you to tell me about that. Tell us about that. But she's a fascinating storyteller, amazing experiences, and she's going to share a short story with us, as well as a poem that she will read to us. So please welcome Judith Nacken from a town of about 2,000, I think.
Hey, good to be here again. Any of you who know Ed know that he seldom tells the truth. He was here for my 87th birthday. There's 422 people in Crowder, Oklahoma. And the Owl Canyon publishers give you the first and the last paragraph, and you got to put 48 in between. Try to make a story out of that. That's really exciting. And speaking of my 87th birthday, I just had these stripes put in my hair. I'm trying to pass for 80. How am I doing? Ed called me. He said, Judith, you want to come on October? I'm chairing and tell a scary story. And I said, Ed, I don't have any scary stories. And he said, surely you've got some. I said, well, I've got one, but I don't think I want to tell it. And when I got to the rest of my emails, I discovered that he'd already put me on a flyer. I called him back and told him, well, I got a story about autumn leaves that works in with the Halloween. So here it is. This is a true story about my obsession with autumn's leaves. And it starts out in the mid-50s, starts out in the mid-50s when I was a girl. Roger Williams was covering the airwaves with a piano solo called Autumn Leaves. And I'm sure Mark remembers it. September, November. And I was fascinated by it, and I wanted to play it as well as he did and couldn't, but I spent a hard-earned 50 cents for the sheet music anyway. My stepmother and biological father lived in Washington, D.C., and she hauled him in that old 39 Ford up to New England every autumn to see the leaves. I never, ever went with them, but I looked at all her proud Kodachrome colors from her little brownie camera, you know, all of her colored pictures, and I really, really liked them. When I got to Spokane, Washington in the late 60s, some people took me on a road trip to southern British Columbia. You can practically throw a stone to British Columbia from Spokane, Washington. And for the first time in my life, I started to notice the tamarack. You know that you think the tamarack is an evergreen? Well, it isn't. It changes color in the winter. Some red, some gold. It's just amazing. And then my teenagers and I bought a little house in Spokane, and it was bare. And we went to the nursery and bought a half a dozen Lombardy poplars. Do you remember them? They're the tall ones with the branches that go up and little leaves like poplars. And they were about 6 skinny feet tall when we bought them, maybe 4 or 5. But anyway, that fall, they might have shed all of 30 leaves. But we were so proud. We got a burn permit, and we made a little fire and burned our leaves. Somewhere in the mid-70s, I met my last husband, the Dale that Ed is talking about, and the love of my life. And we did a lot of traveling. And in the early 80s, we're on some of those turnpikes. They called them turnpikes, I think only because about every 20 miles you had to pay half a buck or something like that to go any further. But it was either North Carolina or West Virginia. The hillsides in October were like a patchwork quilt, some red, some green, some yellow. Absolutely gorgeous. And of course, I never was a camera buff, so I don't have any pictures of it. But in the late 90s, we moved for the very last time. We moved on to a gorgeous home on the Tulalip Indian Reservation north of Seattle. It was surrounded by old growth maples and pine cedars, and absolutely gorgeous. So tall, and kept the house so cool. We moved there in August, and the owner had even left us about half a cord of wood. And we thought, that's nice. It's a pretty fireplace, what have you. So in late September, the rains came. And we said, won't this be nice? We'll get a couple bottles of wine. We'll light a nice fire. We'll just while away the rain. And we got a couple more bottles. And come May, we were two hopeless alcoholics without a stick of furniture. Now, I got to confess, that part's not true. But that's one of my favorite jokes, and it fits in there so nicely. We bought this gorgeous house. No, I mean, we actually rented for 22 years, this gorgeous house on Tulalip. And that first year, when those maple leaves came down on my deck, I was absolutely amazed. Not only were they rust-colored and yellow and gold, but they were so big. They did not fit in an 8.5 by 11 envelope. And I went down to Staples and got some of the 10 by 14 or whatever the next biggest size is, so I could send off half a dozen or 6 or 8 or 10 with a note to my friends saying, look at the beautiful trees that surround my new house. And then came another October, and another October, and another October. And on the 22nd of October, I think about Roger Williams and September, November, and I hate leaves.
Whoops, lost your sound.
Want to tell her?
Yeah.
I left my.
Hey, Judith, you're muted. I think you pushed a mute button
It's
somewhere.
not muted.
Oh,
Well,
there you go. Now we can hear you. Go ahead. You're
Okay.
going to do a poem.
I've written a sonnet to Joyce Kilmer, and I wish to apologize in advance to any of his descendants and to every real poet that's at this gathering today. But I couldn't resist. I got to put my glasses on. A sonnet for Joyce Kilmer. Comparing a verse to the mighty oak and finding it wanting in final test, it is the childhood's path on which I choke and sputter rebuttals that lay to rest the loveliness of your imagined trees. Bare branches, skeletal against winter's sky, impending death to any soul who sees, yet dares to dream of spring when birds will fly, finding home and shelter in those myriad leaves. Bah! Birds desert and seek the southern star. The moment autumn's remnants clog the eaves, but after months of bird poop on my car. A rose is a rose, the sun is yellow. Keep your maples and oaks, I'll take Longfellow.
Thank you,
That's all I
Judith.
got. That's all I got.
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much from Oklahoma. And she actually is 96 years old, not 87. Correct? Wrong. All right. Okay, so our next storyteller is going to be here in person. And many of you have heard him before. He's a longtime storyteller. He used to do, was it ghost walks down at in the old Sac? Did you do something like that?
Yeah.
So,
11 years.
well, 11 years in Sacramento. So I'm sure we're going to hear some very interesting story from our Auburn storyteller, Auburn area, Eric Hurt. Not at all. Here.
I'll just put the axe back.
That's my problem.
Yeah. Appropriate for Halloween. Hello, everyone. This feels good. So I was reluctant to share this story because of what happened to this engineer. Now he says that it was the strangest thing that ever happened to him. And I kind of believe him. He had just recently moved back to Salinas, and as everyone knows, Salinas over on the coast right next to Monterey. And so he just moved back to Salinas, and he got together with a few days after being there. He got together with a friend of his, a former co-worker, and the two of them went to a bar outside of town, and they're sitting there talking and remembering. And turns out that this engineer, for a time, he worked for the city as their chief engineer over the bridges. And the two men, they kept talking and remembering, and back about 10 years ago, there was this huge storm that came through, this mean storm, and the water rose and it washed away all the bridges. And well, that's why this engineer left. But now he's back in Salinas, and the two men, they toasted each other about his return. Well, it was getting late. The two men, they stepped outside, they said their goodbyes, and the friend went off one way, and the engineer started to walk back into town. And as he was walking into town, he noticed that, well, the moon was starting to get kind of dim, and he looked behind him, and well, the coastal fog was rolling in. Now, this wasn't your usual coastal fog. This was the follow you fog. I don't know if you've ever had fog like that, but you're walking this way and the fog follows you this way, and you go that way and it follows you that way. Well, he's going through town and trying to make his way back to home, but every which way he'd go, that fog was following him until he found himself standing in front of the cemetery. Well, his home was on the other side of the cemetery, and the follow you fog was right behind him. And the follow you fog, it was known for just making, if you were in it too long, it just drench your clothing, it'd just be wet. So he decided, well, he would just take advantage of the cemetery and go through it. So he passed by the headstones, passed by the row upon row upon row, until he made his way up to the center around the center of the cemetery, where there was this tree that kind of grew up. It was this cypress, one of those coastal cypress trees. And when he was standing there, he was looking off, and well, now the follow you fog had gone all around the cemetery. The only place it wasn't was where he was at. So we thought he'd just give it a few minutes to see maybe he would just pass on. So he found himself a headstone and decided he'd just sit for a moment. And he's looking up at this tree that kind of grew up and then kind of twisted around and went like so, and just kind of looking at it kind of in awe. And while he's sitting there, the drinks he had before are starting to play a little bit in his mind. And well, he's thinking he's hearing something kind of like a little bit of like a teeth chattering, and he's looking around, and there in the shadow, there's this older girl, young woman, and she's standing there just with her teeth just chattering, she's looking at him, and so he, hello, and he says his name, and she says hello, and she says her name, and he says, I'm just sitting here just looking up and enjoying this tree here. And she goes, I like to look up at the tree too. And it's like, it's getting kind of late. I'm sure your mother and father are missing you. You should probably be on your way home, shouldn't you? And she stands there. Yes, my mother and father are probably missing me, and I should be on my way home. And she steps out from the shadow, and she's just drenched in water. And he's thinking, oh, she must have been hanging out in that fog. And so he gets up and he takes off his jacket, and he insists that she take it. Of course, she no, but he insists. So she takes it, she puts it on, and she thank you. And then she tells him her address and says tomorrow morning she could come by and pick up the jacket. So he says goodbye, and he watches her go off and disappear into the fog. And when he turns, well, the fog is kind of parted. There's this clear path to his home. So he takes advantage of it and heads home. Now, the next morning, it's a sunny day, and he heads off, kind of wandering around the streets looking for the address until he comes to what he believes is the home. And he knocks on the door, and there's this older woman and an older man, and they greet him at the door. And he says, hi there. I ran across your daughter last night, and I loaned her my jacket, and I've come to collect it. Well, the woman looked up at the man, and the man looked down at the woman, and they invited him into their home. There in the home, they started asking all these questions and more questions and more questions. And he was telling about how well they met in the cemetery, and how she said that she liked looking up at the tree. And then the father went over to a shelf, and he grabbed this portrait, this picture of three girls, and the engineer, he pointed to the one right in the middle, saying that's her, that's who I saw in the cemetery. And the father said, that's my daughter. This was taken 3 days. This was taken on her birthday 3 days before she died. Well, now the engineer, he's asking the couple questions and more questions and more questions. And he decides to take the father to the cemetery so he can show him where he saw the daughter, the woman, young girl. And so they're walking there. And as they're going, the older man, the father tells the engineer that, well, his daughter, it's just funny that this is all happening now, because it was 10 years to the day, last night, the night before, that she died in that mean storm that came through. She was crossing a bridge, and when the bridge washed out, she fell in the water and she drowned. Well, they make it to the cemetery, and then they go past the row upon row of headstones, and they go up to where that big cypress tree is. And then the engineer, he points at the headstone that he was leaning against that night. And then the father goes, yes, that's my daughter's grave right there, the one looking up at the tree. And the engineer, he gets down and he crouches to look at the name. And as he's looking, he sees water starting to pour down between the letters. Wow. And he starts looking up, looking at it. Ah! At least that was going on in his head. There on the headstone was his jacket, nicely folded but sopping wet. Well, he collected the jacket, and I'm not sure exactly what he said to the father after that, but he took the jacket, and in time he had to get rid of the coat, because no matter how hard he would try, that jacket would always remain wet, and it would never, ever dry. Thank you.
Ooh. Okay, thank you for that. You can tell the experience he's had telling ghost stories. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So our next storyteller is John O'Bear, and he teaches out at American River College in environmental studies, and he is involved with capital storytelling. And I'm sure he can tell you about some of the events that are coming up. I'd like you maybe at the end of your thing to tell us about something that's happening. He produces an event that people can go to and actually have an open mic. You can share your stories. And Capital Storytelling puts on all kinds of workshops. And so he'll tell us more about that. He's a fantastic storyteller. I've heard him a few times now. And he's won a couple of the, have you won the Moth? No, okay. He's second place at the Moth competitions in Berkeley. So hopefully he's gonna get this first place. The next time he does, I know he's a regular there. So you're in for a real treat hearing John O'Bear.
All right, sound is quality's good?
Yep.
Great.
So this is a true personal story. I'm 20 years old, trembling, alone in a room in the dark with tears welling up in my eyes. I am paralyzed with fear. Now, it's not exactly my dad's fault, but I think he can take a little bit of the blame because you see, 11 years earlier, when I was 9 years old, my dad took me to see The Exorcist. 50 years later, we both still regret that decision. That movie was horrifying and traumatizing. Now, in my dad's defense, the motion picture rating system was brand new, and the R rating simply meant that I had to be with an adult. You know, it's not like he gave me a pack of smokes and dropped me off to watch the movie by myself. And there was no parental movie guide back then. The published warning simply said strong language and disturbing imagery. Have you seen the movie?
Oh,
this is
God.
like the understatement of the 1970s.
Right.
And, you know, finally, as a devout Catholic, I think my dad saw the movie as a Catholic-themed tale of good triumphing over evil, which it is in a horrific sort of projectile vomit way. I had nightmares for months. I'd wake up crying in the middle of the night. I'd go into my parents' room. I'd take my blankets and drag them into my sister's room and make a little nest and sleep there. She loved that. Well, eventually I was able to let go of the fear and manage it, but it was always lurking somewhere in my subconscious. And people would joke about The Exorcist, like, oh, it's so campy, you know, with the pea soup and the spinning heads. And I worked at a summer camp. We had archery and arts and crafts and swimming. Demonic possession was not on the program. The movie is not funny. Well, years go by, and as a junior in college, I get this amazing opportunity to go study abroad in Sweden. And this is life-changing for so many reasons, but one of the great things is that it gives me this opportunity to invent and reinvent myself. And one of the first things I decide is that I don't want to be Catholic anymore. And, you know, it's not because I have any grudge against the Catholic Church. I just didn't feel Catholic, and I didn't feel particularly religious either. So they put us up in this dormitory at a boarding school for the first couple of weeks in this historic village called Sigtuna. And the idea was to expose us to the language and the culture before releasing us into the wild. And that first day is just a blur of jet lag and new faces and strange food. But the strangest thing is the sunlight. 20 hours a day at that latitude. And then even when the sun goes down, it never gets dark. So I sleep horribly that night and wake up really early. And again, it's a day filled with exploration and new experiences, but it's all tinged with this dreamlike feeling brought on by sleep deprivation. So that night, there's several of us who want to take this unsanctioned field trip to the old stone ruins of a church down the road. Sitting there drinking beers in the late evening twilight, the 1,000-year-old Catholic Church has this ethereal, spooky feeling to it. Ironically, I'd traveled 7,000 miles to escape the Catholic Church, only to find myself sitting in a Catholic church. But at least there's beer. So eventually we all head back to our respective dorm rooms to get some sleep. And I take my curtains and I completely shut them tight and I make sure they overlap so that no sunlight can get in. And I turn off the light, lay down to go to sleep, and there's sunlight coming in. So my plan B is I have this thick blanket and some tacks, and I go tack up the blanket over the window, and I turn off the light, lay down to go to sleep, and there's still sunlight coming through. So this time, with obsessive precision. I tack the perimeter of the blanket around the entire window as tight as I can, and I check for holes. And when I'm satisfied, I turn out the light, lay down, and go to sleep. And it is pitch black, except for this faint spray of light on the wall above me across from the window. And I am exasperated. So I put my hand up to see if I can figure out where the sunlight is coming through. But strangely, it doesn't cast a shadow. And I sit up and I lean in and look at the wall. And as my eyes focus and adjust, a wave of absolute terror washes over me. There on the wall, shimmering in a yellowish green light, it says, Satan 666. And I am instantly, that little 9-year-old boy, paralyzed with fear, trembling, frozen. I am hovering in a purgatory somewhere between puking and crying and falling asleep and cardiac arrest. And it goes on for, I don't know, minutes, days, months. I have no idea. But at some point, I'm able to finally scream, and I'm flailing my arms looking for the light switch. And somehow I find it. And I flick on the light. And everything returns to normal. And I am trying to catch my breath, and my heart is about to explode from my chest. And slowly, tentatively, I inch toward the wall, and I lean in and I look really closely. And there I see it says Satan 666, painted in fluorescent paint.
Oh, good.
It is a practical joke.
Oh, good.
And a damn good one at that. So I sit down on the edge of the bed to catch my breath and ponder the situation. You know what I do? I cover up Satan's little memo when I turn off the light, and I lay down and I go to sleep. Because I realize that I don't need a Catholic priest with holy water and a crucifix to perform an exorcism, because I can do that myself. All I need is a pillowcase and some thumbtacks. Thank you. So thank you, everyone. So I work with Capital Storytelling, and one of our very next things, Wednesday evening at Sac State, and you can find this on our website, capitalstorytelling.com. We're hosting a curated live storytelling event, true personal stories from the immigrant community throughout Sacramento. We're super excited about that. It's totally free. We like people to RSVP, so you can find information about that on our website. We teach all sorts of classes. I heard one person at least one person talking about having taken classes there. I took a beginner's and an advanced. And I host a monthly open mic, True Personal Stories, at Log Off Brewing in Rancho Cordova. So it's the first Tuesday of the month. That's on our calendar. And let me also say that the Sacramento County Library System has contracted us to host a series of completely free true storytelling workshops. And the goal is really to mine storytelling ideas. Anybody who ever thinks they don't have a story, everyone has a story. So you can go on Capital Storytelling's website, you can go on the Sacramento County Library website, and there's like 7 or 8 of them throughout the library system that are being given November and December. So yeah, hope to see you there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm gonna have memories of seeing The Exorcist tonight. I saw The Exorcist when it first came out in Georgia with a friend, and we went to see it, and his mother came, and she was terrified. But what just really upset me was all these families that brought these little kids, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they for sure had nightmares for quite a while. And I thought I was doing my son a favor when he was 5. He there was this book called There's a Nightmare in My Closet. It's a very cute little book. And he didn't have any problem sleeping in his own room, all that. And I thought, well, I'm going to read that book to him, because in it, the little boy confronts his nightmare. And then, he doesn't have nightmares anymore. He invites him into his bed, and probably doesn't have room for more nightmares. So I read that to him. Then, took up, and then I went into my own room to sleep. And about 20 minutes later, Daddy, I think there's a nightmare in my closet. And it took about a month before he got over that routine. So the best intentions, right? All right. So our next poet, he's a storyteller and a poet, is an amazing storyteller and a recitationist. And he can explain what that means. That's the first time I'd heard that. He recited this fantastic poem about toe fungus. And two of his friends in St. John's, Newfoundland, replied, and it was just humorous, the little battles they got back and forth with this storytelling. Bruce is from Boston, and I took a trip this summer, and I spent a couple days with him there. And he puts on this story space. It's every Tuesday. You have to say the time. I don't exactly remember when that is, but you can go online and share stories at that event. And it's been going on for a long time. He took it over from someone named Brother Blue. He's a producer, a fantastic storyteller, a great person. So please welcome from Boston, Bruce Marcus.
Well, thank you, Ed, for that wonderful introduction. I didn't kind of recognize myself, and the one thing that you could do to have your son not worry anymore about the nightmare in the closet is take him to see The Exorcist. That'll get him over the closet thing real fast. And the one line I remember we used to like to mangle when I was young, I think I was a teenager when that movie came out. We used to say, "Your mother sells socks that smell." If you remember the line that the possessed woman said to the preacher, it kind of rhymed with that, but that wasn't exactly what she said. Yeah, I can tell some of you remember the actual line. Yeah, very well. The story space takes place every Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, which means it takes place from 6 to 8 p.m. over there on the left coast. And our first hour, we're on Zoom these days. Occasionally we do a hybrid session like you guys are doing today, but mostly we're on Zoom. And our first hour is open telling, 8-minute limit. We'd love to have any of your wonderful tellers come and share a story there. And then during the second hour, we have a feature who generally holds forth for about 40 minutes of that second hour. And we've had this character named Ed Lewis on there, and he was a wonderful feature. Let's see, what else? Okay, I think that about covers most everything. Oh, actually the Newfoundland thing was a little different than you recounted, Ed. I was being interviewed online during the pandemic. There was a woman who has a series here on the East Coast that helps out, raises money for refugee resettlement work, and she asked me what I was doing with storytelling. I was being interviewed on Zoom because nobody was getting together at all. And one of my pals in Newfoundland in my international rhymers group was watching the interview. And I said, I'm getting together every Sunday with these wonderful rhymers. And these guys in Newfoundland, they'll write a rhyme about anything. I mean, they'll rhyme about toe fungus. And one of the guys was watching, and the next time the group met, about half a dozen of them ambushed me with recitations about toe fungus. So that started a back and forth battle. It was very, very entertaining, and one of the most rewarding aspects of my entire multi-decade storytelling journey. So, as it were. All right, so on to my offerings for the day. Judith has inspired me to share a couple of my very short seasonal poems before I tell you a more Halloween-themed story. So the first poem is very short. The title is a good 25% of the entire poem. It's called An Autumn Walk Without My Gloves. An autumn walk without my gloves. Let my hands get cold. I won't be needing them. except perhaps to swing by my sides like pendulums or metronomes, to clock my stride as I step along past orange and yellow and red bright dying leaves and ponder, what would this life be like if I too could go out in such a colorful blaze of glory when my hands turn this cold again for good. And I was out walking in the New England woods today, and I don't know if it was the unbelievable amount of rain that we got this summer, but the foliage is spectacular here right now. We have reds and oranges and yellows, and it's just gorgeous. The sad part comes when all the leaves fall off the trees, and then you got to endure 6 months with bare branches. And that's why people live in California. The second poem is entitled Geese. Now, do you guys have Canada geese out there in California?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. Because I was visiting Southern California in February, and it was very different than New England. There were farmers markets with all kinds of produce, which we don't have in February. And I probably saw more hummingbirds the first 3 days I was out there than I've seen in my entire life. But anyway, the Canada goose is quite ubiquitous here. They exist in great numbers. And so this is called Geese. You wonder, do they notice your upturned face down there, way down there, as you pause in your task pressing apples into cider to watch them drive their wedge through the cerulean autumn sky? Notice you, perhaps, but you know they cannot read your thoughts, could not possibly understand how the sight and sound of them, winging southward, startles something curled up tightly deep inside. Their calling pierces the afternoon, and you are reminded at once of the timeless and unbending ritual of migration, the beauty of their V formation, and the sadness of their leaving. Presently, they vanish behind a line of apple trees, and you, sighing, turn back now to dual tasks, cider pressing and steeling yourself for the cold, dark days ahead. Geese. Thank you. And now we'll move on to something. Oh, thank you, whoever put a heart up there on your Zoom screen. By the way, how many folks do you have over there in the live venue? I can see a microphone and books, but oh, look, there's people. Hi. All right, good to see you. And I presume I'm on a screen somewhere, just off camera.
Yep.
There I am. Hey, look at that. It looks just like me. All right. Thank you for that camera pivot. Now I know who I'm telling stories to. And you fine folks here on the Zoom with me. I write my own material. I think a lot of you do too. And generally, I write a story first and the title comes after. But this story, just the opposite happened. My wife one day was trying to leave the house and she couldn't find her reading glasses, and it took a while for her to find her reading glasses. And in the meantime, she got pretty flustered. And then, oh, where are my keys? She said, where's the car key? I need the car key to leave. And then when she found the car key, oh, in that envelope, I cannot go where I'm going without that envelope. Finally, she got so exasperated. She said, oh, where is my head? That, I said, is a really good name for a story. So the title came first and then the story. This is told from the point of view of a 10-year-old boy, and it's called Where Is My Head? No, you know what? I wasn't going to tell that story. I was going to do something entirely different. All right, I'll tell Where Is My Head? Now, I know you're not supposed to go trick-or-treating by yourself, and I wasn't really. It was the Halloween when I was 10 years old, and I was on my way to my best friend Henry's house to get him so that we could go trick-or-treating together. Well, as I was leaving the house, my father looked up over the magazine that he was reading, looked up over his half-rim reading glasses, and said to me, "Hey, sport, where are you going?" Bugs me when he calls me sport. I said, trick-or-treating. He said, well, you shouldn't go trick-or-treating alone. And I said, well, I'm not really. I'm on my way to Henry's house. Well, like I was just telling all of you. And that's what I set out to do. Well, I was in the center of town, the part where all the stores are, and it was kind of creepy because at that hour of the day, normally there's all kinds of people driving all up and down the street, walking all up and down the sidewalk and in and out of stores. But I was all alone. I could hear my footsteps echoing off the sides of the building. Clip, clop, clip, clop. Dead leaves startled me as they rattled in the tree overhead, and way back behind me down the sidewalk, I could hear the wind begin to moan. Way, way, where is my head? I thought I heard a voice. Well, two things jumped into my head at that moment. One, I should have listened to my father and taken a ride to Henry's house. And two, I should have listened to my mother and cleaned my ears better when I took a bath. Well, I started to walk a little faster. And then I thought, wait a minute. And I thought, oh gosh, it's probably a ghost. A ghost from the last century. Somebody who was decapitated. We just learned that word in school that week. It means somebody who met with a very unfortunate accident. Somebody who was decapitated, and then their head was cut off, and the head was buried in one place, and the body was buried in another. And every year, on Halloween night, that headless body would roam around the countryside like this one was now, calling out in that mournful voice, which I heard again now. This time a little louder, this time clearer, this time unmistakable, and this time you're invited to say it with me. It went, where is my head? And then I thought, wait a minute, Bruce, slow down. It's probably just somebody messing with you, right? Somebody on their way to a Halloween party, somebody in costume, maybe somebody with one of those costumes where they put fake shoulders over here and they throw a shirt over the whole thing and walk around peeking out of a buttonhole looking like a very tall, headless person. But I didn't have much time to be comforted by that thought, because I heard that voice again. This time it was close. This time it was loud. This time it was right behind me. It went, with me, people, it went, where is my head? It feels good to say that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you really mean it, in which case you wouldn't be able to say it anyway. Anyway, I stopped dead in my tracks, if you'll pardon the Halloween pun. Turned around, and there, coming towards me, was this woman who looked like she belonged in the last century. She was wearing these dark black or charcoal gray clothes. Her hands were pale and skeletal. Her face was thin and pale, and her gray hair was long and stringy. And wait a minute, face, hair? There was nothing missing. She was all there. I mean, I don't know if she was all there, but there wasn't anything missing, if you know what I mean. But I didn't have much time to be comforted by this thought either, because now she was walking right towards me, and then she walked right past me. And when she did, she called out in that same mournful voice. She said, with me now, she said, where is my head? And I don't know what came over me, but I got very bold all of a sudden. I squatted down a little bit, not sure why, pointed up at her, and I said, lady, it's right there, on top of your neck. Well, the woman stopped, also dead in her tracks, and then very slowly, she turned around to face me. And then, and I thought, oh, and then very slowly, she began to raise her hands up in the air like this, higher and higher up in the air. And I thought, oh great, she's a witch. She's a witch, and she's going to turn me into a frog. She's going to turn me into a frog, and I'll have to hop all the way home tonight. I'll hop all the way home. And then if I can even get up the front stairs, I won't be able to reach the doorknob or the bell. I'll have to slap at the bottom of the front door with a small wet foot. My parents, if they even hear me, will open the front door, see it's just a frog, probably push me off into the bushes with their foot, and I'll have to sleep all alone tonight out in the cold. Tomorrow morning when the school bus comes, I won't be able to get on the bus and go to school. Come to think of it, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to be a frog. Anyway, higher and higher, she raised her hands up in the air, and then when they could go no higher, she began to bring them down, 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 until they came to rest like this, just on top of her head. And then, very, very slowly, a smile began to grow on her face. "Ow," she said. "Yes, there it is. Oh, thank you. You're such a helpful young man." And then, with her hand still on top of her head, just like this, she turned and continued on down the street. And I was left there to wonder, was she a witch? Was she a ghost? Or someone in a ghost from the last century, or someone in costume on their way to a Halloween party, or just some kooky lady? I don't know. I never did find out. But what I do know is that as she walked away from me down the street with her hands still on top of her head, just like this, I heard her call out in a mournful voice into the cold, cold night, "Where are my hands?" Where is my head? Thank you.
Oh, great humor as usual, Bruce. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey. And let's see. Oh, okay, I have a head. All right. Okay, so our next storyteller is a Davis person. He's new into the storytelling. I met him through the Oddfellows Lodge. He's a great artist. He does some wonderful art projects with us. He's got one coming up, right? Or yesterday. Oh, yesterday. Okay. And he can tell us something about that. Maybe you can get involved with that in the future. We at the Oddfellows Lodge, we hired Jack Gallagher, a famous storyteller, performer here in the Sacramento area, to come and do a workshop for anybody in the Oddfellows to put humor into stories. And so 7 of us signed up, and we had a 6-week program with him and a couple hours every week. We developed a story, we send it to him, we could do a couple stories, and then he said these stories would work for adding humor into what you've already written. And Finley had never done anything like this before. I was the only one that had some experience, and the other tellers were brand new at it. And he just masterfully guided us into creating really unique stories. And Finley's was definitely one of the best ones. And we got to perform it for a couple of hundred Oddfellows at the Oddfellows Lodge, and it was fantastic. Everybody just did an amazing job. And, from that, I want to encourage Finley to keep on storytelling. So he came here and did that story here. And now he's back, going to do another story with us. He's an art teacher at a Christian high school here, Christian Brothers High School in Sacramento. So please welcome Finley McIntosh.
Mark. Thank you, everyone. The first smartphones at my high school were a novelty, the latest glowing gadgets. It was mostly kids from wealthy families who had them, and they loved to show off their access to the internet. Mostly funny videos of cats not being very graceful or talking dogs. Ooh, bacon. I myself was happy with my flip phone. Sending a text by hitting the keypad 2 or 3 times was not a big deal. Texts are meant to be pithy. I had a computer at home with the internet, and I had a digital camera to snap pictures. I was ready for the cyber revolution. Bring it on. Smartphones by themselves did not rock the world of adolescence, but combined with the invention of social media 5 minutes later certainly did. MySpace and Facebook were all innocent enough. A friendly way to stay in touch with people after you left college. You could promote your yard sale on this Saturday, or find like-minded people who also love HO train sets. Social media has this lovely feature where you can like what someone posts. How cool is that? You can send some love to someone 3 states over who also thinks Timothy Dalton would have been the best James Bond ever if they had just given him a chance. The world was becoming more friendly and likable, all thanks to smartphones and social media, the twin avatars of a new generation. But the friendly like button was more like the devil in a blue dress. Kids craved all the likes. When teenagers got on Facebook, no request for friendship was denied. You could become popular sitting alone in your bedroom, eating a pint of ice cream. Mom, dad, parents, grandparents, siblings were now your cyber friends. Cousins, aunts, uncles, people you didn't know were now friends. Even people you didn't like were made friends. And all you had to do was post stuff about your life and get more likes and more friends. But what really drove home the big numbers is when you said edgy things or posted provocative pictures. The World Wide Web didn't apply to a high school student just having some fun with this amazing electronic Oz. It made everyone feel so good. The most powerful hand tool ever invented was now in the opposable thumbs of teenagers. What could go wrong?
Yeah, right.
2 minutes after social media was invented, some guy convinced his sophomore girlfriend to let him take a picture of her topless. He assured her it will go no further. It's for my eyes only. Pinky swear.
Yeah, right.
The smartphone had this miracle of miracles, this feature where every time his phone notified him, his girlfriend's boobies appeared on the screen. Is there anything these phones can't do? He meant it when he said it was for his eyes only, and he will delete the pictures anytime she asked, until he found out she was flirting with some football player at a party he didn't attend. He heard it from his best friend, who also didn't attend the party, but heard it from a very good source, well, a pretty good source, that they were dancing together like Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift. Well, with betrayal like that, he really had an obligation to warn others what a shameless hussy she was, and the righteous thing to do is to post the embarrassing pictures online. But because mom and dad were all friends with their kids on the same social media, they saw the pictures also. And now the school was involved. This was a real quandary for administrators. There had always been a certain separation between what kids did on campus and what they did in their own time. But the World Wide Web blurred that line. What do you do when students are posting pictures and videos of themselves in varying degrees of buffoonery, and they're wearing a high school sweatshirt advertising exactly where they go to school? This was a problem. The school's reputation was being compromised. So the job of regulating internet behavior fell upon our dean, Steve. Steve was a real sheepdog who took the job of protecting students seriously. He was firm, but jovial. He didn't take their tomfoolery personally, and he didn't particularly care if students liked him. Parents too, for that matter. Parents would call Steve and tell him just what they're seeing on their child's Facebook page. Steve would call in parents or call in students, sometimes with the parents, lay out the evidence of their internet indiscretions, and most left embarrassed and red-faced, lesson learned. But there were parents who vehemently felt that Steve had crossed the line and was now controlling their personal lives. The reaction of teachers was similar. Most were happy they did not have the dean's job and stayed quiet, waiting for the dust to settle on this unexpected twist in the digital revolution. But there were teachers who felt that students' right to free expression was being infringed upon. One teacher stood up at a faculty meeting, turned herself into a constitutional scholar and defended kids' rights against illegal search and seizure under the Bill of Rights. Others called Steve a Nazi book burner using Gestapo tactics to spy on children. Steve wasn't expecting his fellow educators to turn on him this way, and he was shocked that so many felt it was none of our business that underage girls were posting nude selfies, others to drink copious amounts of alcohol for the camera, or to post where the weekend party would be because the parents were out of town. The cool teachers understood this was just kids being kids. And this behavior has been a part of growing up since Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. It didn't hurt their popularity with kids either if they advocated for them. They were, after all, cool teachers. One thing you can say about the World Wide Web, it evened the playing field. In the art of revenge, bullying, and rumors, boys had no advantage over girls, and nerds could strike back against their tormentors. Everyone had equal access to allegations, opinions, and what the cafeteria was serving on Tuesday. It wasn't just kids who learned the hard way about the World Wide Web. Several prospective teachers didn't get hired after their social media became public. One teacher was all but hired until his Facebook profile picture became known. In it, he was wearing an oversized sombrero. He had a fruity beverage with a paper umbrella in it and a big smile on his face, telling the world he was loving life. Unfortunately, he was also giving the camera the finger. And so ended his teaching career before it ever began. Kids may not like researching the economic causes of the French Revolution, but they will look for juicy information about their teachers online. Eventually, the dust did settle, sort of. Kids learned some lessons. Never, ever, never friend grandma on social media. If you're inspired to send a nude picture off into the cyber world, don't include your face in the picture. Duh. Eventually, Facebook fell out of fashion and kids got new platforms and a fresh start and better ways of keeping meddling parents and administrators in the dark. All the kids now have iPads at school, so they have access to the internet, and the school counters this by putting more sophisticated filters on the internet. There's an app now where teachers can know just what website kids are on during class. And most teachers have installed a phone caddy to cut back on sneaky texting. It is a cat and mouse game. And quite frankly, I don't know who the cat is and who is the mouse. Thank you, everyone. I just want to say, Eric, there's a version of that story on the south side of Chicago from Bachelor's Grove that's very similar. It's different, but very, very similar.
It's part of a hotel.
Yeah, I could tell you that real quickly that if you have time, the South Side Chicago version is there was this guy a young guy, and his mom was concerned he wasn't getting out to meet friends, so she really pressured him to go to this dance that was being held at this church right by Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. And really, just to shut his mom up, he decided to go to the dance. He would just drive there, go, make an appearance, and come back home. While he was there, he met this girl, and they just magically hit it off. They just danced together well. They talked. It was just really one of those magical moments. The dance broke up, and he said, well, let me give you a ride home. And she goes, no, I live close. I'll be fine. Please. She goes, no, I'm, being a proper gentleman. He really insisted. And she goes, all right, you can give me a ride home. So as they're walking to his car, she starts to get cold. He takes off his jacket, drapes it over her shoulders. They drive home. As they get right in front of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, she says, please, could you just let me out here? He goes, no, I'll take you home. He goes, I cut across the cemetery all the time. That's my house up on that hill. You can see the light on. It's a shortcut. My family situation, it's really complicated. I'd really appreciate it if you let me out here. So he does. And she gets out, cuts through the cemetery, drives away, so happy he met her. And then he remembered, oh, she has my coat. Well, this is a perfect opportunity now to go back and get my coat. I know where she lives. So, the next day he knocks on the door and says, is Mary here? And the mother says, is this some kind of joke? Well, Mary died. She's buried in that cemetery. You know what's coming. He goes through the cemetery, and there, draped over her tombstone, is his jacket.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to tell people what you did, the art stuff you're doing with the iPhone?
Oh, yeah. Well, twice a year, we have an art show that's really intended for amateurs. So we have some sort of theme. Last night was our show. Our theme was zombies, which was appropriate. And we were really talking about and then we'll have one in February. The theme is doors. So if you're interested, and it could be literally a door. And we thought of doors because most people's front doors, there's thought put into it to make it seem welcoming, inviting, but it can be a symbolic door as well. So we're kind of let your imagination.
And
run
what are
wild
people
with that.
doing as far as the art stuff?
Paintings, drawings, sculpture, ceramics, found objects. Just really anything that you would like to put together. We ask that you make it displayable. It doesn't have to be framed, but displayable. And an artist statement is really nice. What was your inspiration?
And it's open to anyone, not just Oddfellows.
Yeah, I think it's open. Yeah, it is. And we had a really interesting discussion yesterday about when I was a kid, vampires were the thing, but now it seems that zombies have taken over the popularity, and we don't know why that is. Vampires are kind of zombies. They're more like a James Bond version of a zombie. They're sophisticated, but anyway, zombies are all the rage now. Anyway, thanks everyone.
All right, well, if anyone wants, you can go up and get some food items over here, snacks that Vicky's put out, if any of you are interested in doing that. Yeah, go ahead. So our next teller is also involved with the Oddfellows Lodge in Davis. That's where I met him, and he is a poet. He's a writer. He's written poetry, nonfiction, short stories. He's published drama in the National Beat Poetry Foundation, Pure Slush, and Long Island Quarterly. He's from the Brooklyn, New York area. He has an MFA there. And I haven't heard his poetry, but I'm very interested. He's going to read some of his poetry, and his name is Mark Donnelly.
Thanks, Ed.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Donnelly. I'm originally from New York. I've lived in Davis the past 2 years. This first poem was just published in Long Island Quarterly, and it's called The Sadness of Sunday. Is this okay? Pacing indoors, frustrated, new pages not working, stepping outdoors to your own. Let me just get through today. Chorus, head down, walking a worn root of sameness, pit of the stomach, meeting the sameness of Sunday in the quiet and nowhere to go. In the time standing still, yet always moving, a deadness and despair in the late afternoon on the empty streets, looking at windows of houses where you don't belong. Stuck on base with no chance of getting home, how to escape the creeping numbness that stretches out like the late afternoon shadows. What happened to the lying down on soft grass in childhood, spreading your legs out freely, where time means nothing and there are no demands? Sinking with the hours as quickly as the sun behind a cloud, a drop in the pocket, not as a winning shot, but as a scratch, a gutter ball at the alley. The inevitability of losing, another week used up. And then this next piece is called Fade to Dark. It was published in the National Beat Poetry Foundation anthology for 2020. I came here today like I regularly do after work, putting in about 5 hours each weekday since the heart attack. Handyman to the stars, that's how I bill myself. Slow go now. But in here, as the sun is setting, I push the dark faster. I like the quiet before the previews. I choose a seat up front by myself to be more involved. I like the idea of entering the dark, knowing outside it will soon be that way too. With no more drinking, I have my evening cocktail here. I have the screen, the event, the escape. What's my pleasure tonight? Finding Neverland with Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet. I anticipate a wonderful coupling. I am escaping being alone after another failed relationship. That last one with Mary Ann threw me into a garage on the side of a house here in sunny LA. Santa Monica to be specific, and to be more specific about the garage, this converted studio apartment as advertised, I am surrounded by DVDs, videos, and books of magic. Books that have helped guide me to amateur night at the Magic Castle in Hollywood. Magic and movies, movies and magic, magic in movies, my magical life. And here, before the previews and shows start, I am ready to engage what's coming next to this 3rd Street multiplex on the promenade in Santa Monica. It's starting. I must focus, dive in. Let the story take me, the colors carry me, the Depp and Winslet characters inhabit me. He's the playwright who creates Peter Pan. She's a widow with children who meet in an English park one afternoon. Ah, the children. Let me go back to childhood too. I loved the Saturday movies. Now, much older, I am a daily cinema communicant. Sit back and relax. Maybe I'll drift off. I hope not. I want to see the show. Am I drifting? I know I'm tired after work and sleepy. Am I drifting? Am I sleeping? I think I am drifting. Have I found it? Is this it? Drifting away, flying away with Peter, Wendy, Michael, and John over Hollywood and the Magic Castle. I'm flying, flying. The usher calls an unneeded ambulance as I fade to dark.
Wow. All right.
And then these are a little more lighthearted and are childhood based. This was published in this Pure Slush anthology. Pure Slush is a publisher in Australia. The anthology theme was work. It's called A Really Cool Job. On a train trip to Trenton from Penn Station, New York, red cap, white jacket, he rolls his silver metal cart with goodies down the aisle, stopping for customers. Breakfast or a snack in mid-morning on this travel adventure. Milk and soda in the ice below, everything fitting just fine. He reaches down smoothly for the drinks. Big smile as he hands me pound cake and a small container of milk. Mom gives me money. I give it to him. The man working on the railroad has such a cool job, making people happy. I'd love to help if he'd let me. I could get a uniform like his. I could walk in front and call out, food and beverages, food and beverages. I'll see him again on the train ride home. And this is called Red Truck, also published in Pure Slush in an anthology about childhood. I come here every day after school. I walk all the way around the truck, looking it over. I look at the fading red paint exterior and the worn black leather seat, the big steering wheel, and the tall floor shift. I read the vehicle registration sticker on the windshield, 1936 Chevrolet pickup. It is late afternoon and quiet. No one is outside except two little girls jumping rope on the front lawn, 3 houses down. I know Mr. Joe Panarella is at work. The other, much newer truck with his name written on the side is not here. It's usually parking space empty. I have an hour until he comes back. I have noted his pattern often. I climb on the running board and pull the door handle on the driver's side. I am delighted and maybe surprised when it opens. I grab onto the steering wheel and pull myself into the cab. In the driver's seat, I lean forward and clutch the wheel with both hands, rubbing my fingers over nicks and counting them. I look through the windshield and then up the dead-end street. I sit ever on the lookout for Mr. Panarello or his wife, flashing glances through both windows in the rearview mirror and side mirrors. I am driving down a country road, making deliveries. I am a driver in a bank heist, waiting for a signal. I am wearing an old brown leather jacket that belonged to Dad's friend, Johnny McGinnis. I wear 2 sweatshirts underneath and still it swamps me. I am on the run, even though our house stands at the other end of the block. I am miles away. I am distant. I am alone. I am an outlaw. I am a mechanic. I am a drifter who has found the truck and climbed inside. I will start the engine with a screwdriver like in the movies. I will be famous. I am 10 and will be back tomorrow.
Nice.
Okay. How am I doing on time?
One more, it'll be fine.
Okay. This is called Home for Bill Evans, famous jazz pianist. This was just published in online, and it's called the publication is called Jerry Jazz Musician. The young man on an album cover from the late 1950s looks straight ahead, thin and serious, a businesslike haircut. When I saw you play at the Village Vanguard in New York, October 1974, you were heavy, wearing a beard, your brown hair hanging like a lion's mane, as you hunched over the piano keys, completely absorbed in your solo work. I was sitting just a short distance away, close enough to see your thick hands, and amazed they produced such delicate, sweet sounds. The same held true in the summer of 1978 at a small club in Boston. I only remember purple in the club's title. Thankful I'd seen your show listed in the paper and followed my instincts to catch you. You'd be dead 2 years later at 51. You made 2 albums with Tony Bennett, just you accompanying him, both looking forward to a 3rd collaboration. But then you were gone, a bleeding ulcer, the after effect of a long heroin habit. I heard Bennett interviewed some years ago when his memoir came out. He spoke of his high regard for you and for your playing, and described a phone conversation when you were weak and sick. He quoted your advice: "Think truth and beauty, nothing else matters." Those 2 words aptly describe your music, and nothing else matters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark, and especially for opening doors back to childhood memories. I can relate to some of those. All right, we are done for today. We had a good lineup here of people on Zoom and our local storytellers here. Nice attendance, and we are so excited that you all came. And we will be having another event next month. We're going to also be celebrating Telebration, which is a national celebration of the art of storytelling that began, I think it was 1979, out of Jonesboro, Tennessee, with the National Storytelling Network. It was actually called National Association for the Perpetuation and Preservation of Storytelling, NAPS. A great group. And people celebrate this in the month of November all over. So there's lots of opportunities to go online now and even in person. So thank you all for coming, and please take advantage of the snacks over there, and let's hear it for all of our storytellers. Okay. And our host next month is John Petrick, and he will be coming back from 4 months in Maine, and actually a bicycle trip he took from Prague to the Black Sea. An amazing trip. He's a bicyclist, and his wife went on half of it with him, and then he continued. I'm sure he's got many adventures to tell us about that. I'm looking forward to that.
The theme is food.
The theme is food. Food. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, and if any of you are interested in storytelling with us, just let me know. Any of our board members. We have Karen and Joyce and Andrew and Terry, and our sign the sheet you said over there.